Section 47, Part 2, Chapter 5, continued, of The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse by Vicente Blasco Ibáñez, translated by Charlotte Brewster Jordan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Frenchman was almost affected. This man represented the Germany that he had many times imagined, a sweet and tranquil Germany composed of burghers, a little heavy and slow perhaps, but atoning for their natural uncouthness by an innocent and poetic sentimentalism. This Blumhardt, whom his companions called Bataillon Commandeur, was undoubtedly the good father of a large family. He fancied him walking with his wife and children under the lindens of a provincial square, all listening with religious unction to the melodies played by a military band. Then he saw him in the beer gardens with his friends, discussing metaphysical problems between business conversations. He was a man from old Germany, a character from a romance by Goethe. Perhaps the glory of the empire had modified his existence, and instead of going to the beer gardens, he was now accustomed to frequent the officers' casino, while his family maintained a separate existence, separated from the civilians by the superciliousness of military caste. But at heart he was always the good German, ready to weep copiously before an affecting family scene or a fragment of good music. Commandant Blumhardt, meanwhile, was thinking of his family living in Cassel. "There are 8 children, monsieur," he said, with a visible effort to control emotion. "The 2 eldest are preparing to become officers. The youngest is starting school this year. He is just so high." And with his right hand he measured off the child's diminutive stature. He trembled with laughter and grief at recalling the little chap. Then he broke forth into eulogies about his wife, excellent manager of the home, a mother who was always modestly sacrificing herself for her children and husband. Ay, the sweet Augusta! After 20 years of married life, he adored her as on the day he first saw her. In a pocket of his uniform, he was keeping all the letters that she had written him since the beginning of the campaign. "Look at her, monsieur. These are my children." From his breast pocket he had drawn forth a silver medallion adorned with the art of Munich, and touching a spring, he displayed the pictures of all the family. The Frau Kommandeur, of an austere and frigid beauty, imitating the air and coiffure of the Empress. The Fräulein Kommandeur, clad in white with uplifted eyes as though they were singing a musical romance. And at the end, the children in the uniforms of the army schools or private institutions. And to think that he might lose these beloved beings if a bit of iron should hit him! And he had to live far from them now that it was such fine weather for long walks in the country. "Sad war," he again said. "May God punish the English." With a solicitude that Don Marcelo greatly appreciated, he in turn inquired about the Frenchman's family. He pitied him for having so few children, and smiled a little over the enthusiasm with which the old gentleman spoke of his daughter, saluting Fräulein Chichi as a witty sprite, and expressing great sympathy on learning that the only son was causing his parents great sorrow by his conduct. Tender-hearted Commandant! He was the first rational and human being that he had met in this hell of an invasion. There are good people everywhere, he told himself. He hoped that this new acquaintance would not be moved from the castle, for if the Germans had to stay there, it would better be this man than the others. An orderly came to summon Don Marcelo to the presence of His Excellency. After passing through the salons with closed eyes so as to avoid useless distress and wrath, he found the Count in his own bedroom. The doors had been forced open, the floors stripped of carpet, and the window frames of curtains. Only the pieces of furniture broken in the first moments now occupied their former places. The sleeping rooms had been stripped more methodically, everything having been taken that was not required for immediate use. Because the general with his suite had been lodging there the night before, this apartment had escaped the arbitrary destruction. The Count received him with the civility of a grandee who wishes to be attentive to his guests. He could not consent that Herr Desnoyers, a relative of a von Hartrott, whom he vaguely remembered having seen at court, should be staying in the keeper's lodge. He must return to his own rooms, occupying that bed, solemn as a catafalque with columns and plumes, which had had the honor, a few hours before, of serving as the resting place of an illustrious general of the empire. "I myself prefer to sleep here," he added condescendingly. "This other habitation accords better with my tastes." While saying this, he was entering Dona Luisa's rooms, admiring its Louis XV furniture of genuine value, with its dull golds and tapestries mellowed by time. It was one of the most successful purchases that Don Marcelo had made. The Count smiled with an artist's scorn as he recalled the man who had superintended the official sacking. What an ass to think that he left this behind, supposing that it was old and ugly! Then he looked the owner of the castle squarely in the face. "Monsieur Desnoyers, I do not believe that I am committing any indiscretion, and even imagine that I am interpreting your desires, when I inform you that I intend taking this set of furniture with me. It will serve as a souvenir of our acquaintance, a testimony to the friendship springing up between us. If it remains here, it will run the risk of being destroyed. Warriors, of course, are not obliged to be artists. I will guard these excellent treasures in Germany, where you may see them whenever you wish. We are all going to be one nation, you know. My friend the Emperor is soon to be proclaimed sovereign of the French." Desnoyers remained silent. How could he reply to that look of cruel irony, to the grimace with which the noble lord was underscoring his words? "When the war is ended, I will send you a gift from Berlin," he added in a patronizing tone. The old collector could say nothing to that either. He was looking at the vacant spots which many small pictures had left on the walls, paintings by the famous masters of the 18th century. The bandit brigand must also have passed these by as too insignificant to carry off. But the smirk illuminating the Count's face revealed their ultimate destination. He had carefully scrutinized the entire apartment, the adjoining bedroom, Chichi's, the bathroom, even the feminine robe room of the family, which still contained some of the daughter's gowns. The warrior fondled with delight the fine silky folds of the materials, gloating over their cool softness. This contact made him think of Paris, of the fashions, of the establishments of the great modistes. The Rue de la Paix was the spot which he most admired in his visits to the enemy's city. Don Marcelo noticed the strong mixture of perfumes which came from his hair, his mustache, his entire body. Various little jars from the dressing table were on the mantel. "What a filthy thing war is!" exclaimed the German. "This morning I was at last able to take a bath after a week's abstinence. At noon I shall take another. By the way, my dear sir, these perfumes are good, but they are not elegant. When I have the pleasure of being presented to the ladies, I shall give them the addresses of my source of supply. I use in my home essences from Turkey. I have many friends there. At the close of the war, I will send a consignment to the family." While speaking, the Count's eyes had been fixed upon some photographs upon the table. Examining the portrait of Madame Desnoyers, he guessed that she must be Dona Luisa. He smiled before the bewitchingly mischievous face of Mademoiselle Chichi. Very enchanting. He specially admired her militant, boyish expression. But he scrutinized the photograph of Julio with special interest. "Splendid type of youth," he murmured. "An interesting head, and artistic, too. He would create a great sensation in a fancy dress ball. What a Persian prince he would make! A white aigrette on his head, fastened with a great jewel, the breasts bared, a black tunic with golden birds." And he continued seeing in his mind's eye the heir of the Desnoyers arrayed in all the gorgeous raiment of an oriental monarch. The proud father, because of the interest which his son was inspiring, began to feel a glimmer of sympathy with the man. A pity that he should select so unerringly and appropriate the choicest things in the castle. Near the head of the bed, Don Marcelo saw lying upon a book of devotions forgotten by his wife, a medallion containing another photograph. It did not belong to his family, and the Count, following the direction of his eyes, wished to show it to him. The hands of this son of Mars trembled. His disdainful haughtiness had suddenly disappeared. An official of the Hussars of Death was smiling from the case. His sharp profile, with a beak curved like a bird of prey, was surmounted by a cap adorned with skull and crossbones. "My best friend," said the Count in tremulous tones, "the being that I love most in all the world. And to think that at this moment he may be fighting and they may kill him. To think that I, too, may die." Desnoyers believed that he must be getting a glimpse into a romance of the nobleman's past. That hussar was undoubtedly his natural son. His simplicity of mind could not conceive of anything else. Only a father's tenderness could so express itself, and he was almost touched by this tenderness. Here the interview came to an end, the warrior turning his back as he left the room in order to hide his emotion. A few minutes after was heard on the floor below the sound of a grand piano, which the commissary had not been able to carry off, owing to the general's interposition. His voice was soon heard above the chords that he was playing. It was rather a lifeless baritone, but he managed to impart an impassioned tremolo to his romance. The listening old man was now really affected. He did not understand the words, but the tears came into his eyes. He thought of his family, of the sorrows and dangers about them, and of the difficulties surrounding his return to them. As though under the spell of the melody, little by little he descended the stairs. What an artist's soul that haughty scoffer had! At first sight, the Germans, with their rough exterior and their discipline which made them commit the greatest atrocities, gave one a wrong impression. One had to live intimately with them to appreciate their true worth. By the time the music had ceased, he had reached the castle bridge. A sub-officer was watching the graceful movements of the swans gliding double over the waters of the moat. He was a young doctor of laws who just now was serving as secretary to His Excellency, a university man mobilized by the war. On speaking with Don Marcelo, he immediately revealed his academic training. The order for departure had surprised the professor in a private institute. He was just about to be married, and all his plans had been upset. What a calamity, sir! What an overturning for the world! Yet many of us have foreseen that this catastrophe simply had to come. We have felt strongly that it might break out any day. Capital, accursed capital, is to blame. End of section 47.